Shout out to Thinking Basketball. Let's go ahead and get started.
During his prime, Reggie Miller averaged an unassuming 21 points, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds per game. He only made 5 All-Star teams, which has led many people to view him as an overrated pseudo-star.
Oh, shit.
He was an all-star who occasionally and memorably could impersonate a superstar on a big stage.
But what if he was so far ahead of his time that he was penalized for the very style that made him effective? What if that style laid the blueprint for a basketball revolution and actually made Reggie Miller one of the most impactful offensive players of his era?
You are watching what greatness
What if?
is all about.
Type shit. I think he's gonna prove why at this point. It's not even a what if, bro. Shout out
The
to Thinking
first season
Basketball,
of
bro.
Greatest Peaks was about the best of the best. But this time we're looking at trendsetters, unique archetypes, and even controversial players who make up the legends of NBA offense.
When Rondo gonna get an episode? Like, type shit, bro. Come on, man.
Do you remember like the player
Can
that
Rondo
you
get
would
some love?
emulate when you were that age? Like so many kids now, it's like you for them. Like who was
Fuck Sean Evans. Hold on. I'm gonna play the audio, but I ain't playing the video though. If you know, you fucking know. This man, Sean Evans is an op. God.
your model?
The motto was Steve Nash and Reggie Miller.
The three-point shot
Okay,
has
thank
become an
God.
enormous part of basketball, but it took a long
That's what I'm
time
saying,
for
drowsy
coaches
boy.
and
We're not getting
players
striked
to
again, bro.
realize just how efficient it could be. When Miller
It's
entered
not
the
Sean
league in
Evans. It's
1998,
copyright.
Larry
Not the
Bird
Sean
held the
Evans.
career record for three-pointers made with 357. Steph Curry's made more in a single season. Among scoring leaders in the playoffs, Miller was one of the few who was bombing threes at modern rates back in the mid-90s. And the difference between his three-point shooting and the average top scorer then is similar to the difference between Curry's edge over the top scorers of his prime. Only there was no concept that these shots were more valuable back then because raw field goal percentage was the standard for efficiency, and Miller was solid but unspectacular by that measure.
Yeah.
No one noticed the difference between long twos and threes, so these two trips were merely seen as 50% field goal shooting instead of generating 4 points compared to the traditional 2. Here's Hall of Famer George Gervin summarizing a generation that looked down on the three.
That's the worst shot in basketball. The best three-point shooters shoot under 40% probably.
Miller actually took a surprising number of long twos because he wasn't hyper-focused on stepping behind the line, instead coming off screens and organically firing from long range.
That's interesting, though.
Moving around like this was at the
Turns out we
heart
could have
of
been
Reggie's
better.
game, running around picks for shots, and you couldn't relax for a second because he'd find any opening. The Pacers are down 3 here in the final minute of this playoff game. Miller drives into a double team, kicks it out, and then tries to sprint over to the other side of the court to get open, only
He be
to
moving
cut
off
back
ball,
to the
though.
near side and find a little spot on the sideline to tie the game.
I will say this, in my opinion, the most underrated, the most underrated skill in basketball is off-ball movement. I ain't gonna lie. Just even in the park, there's way too many people just standing around, just waiting for the ball to come to you to do anything. When in reality, we can get as a team so many better looks if we just had off-ball movement and someone who had the stamina to just keep on running around the fucking basketball court, and that's gonna tire out the defense too. My opinion, the best players of all time, best offensive players of all time, if you're not a great off-ball player, you're missing out on a very big aspect of offense, in my opinion.
in your heart.
Reggie's not the first player to run around in circles and play catch me if you can. But Miller was the first movement-heavy shooter to use the three-point line well before it was in vogue. This is the exact same style Steph Curry used to unlock his off-ball value 2 decades later, running around as the centerpiece of the Warriors' motion-heavy offense into threes or backdoor
Look at
cuts
this
for
shit, bro.
layups.
Like that ass. Imagine guarding Curry. He's not gonna bully ball you, so your energy is not gonna be spent trying to take the hits, pause. Like, if you were guarding Shaq, you are dead ass running around the fucking court. And this dude is never going to be tired. Like, ever. Like, that's the one thing about Curry is his conditioning is fucking insane. I couldn't guard Curry. Just off of him just running around like he has 99 stamina. That's it. Like, that alone makes him a hard guard. Let alone when he actually gets the ball and, like, crosses you and has his all-time handle, too. Now you're cooked. And then if he drives, he has one of the best finishing abilities from a guard ever. From an efficiency standpoint, shit is crazy. And then even if you let him out open a little bit in the three-point line, this was the greatest shooter of all time. He doesn't need that much space. Sometimes it feels like he doesn't need any space. Like, Curry's a tough guard, bro. Tough guard.
Miller was one of the best ever at finding soft spots in the defense and cutting into open space. He often started down on the baseline with the option to run off a weak side screen or use the screen right in front of him to come back and get it for a jumper. If his defender trailed him too wide around that pick, he could curl in for a drive to the basket. Then when the defender starts anticipating that cut, Reggie flies out to the other side, and in each of these situations, he's reading his defender and using their positioning against them to find an opening to attack. Watch what he does to Michael Jordan here. Faking to the near corner, Jordan doesn't bite, so Miller flares to the other side, only the pass never comes, and when Jordan goes under the screen, then Reggie heads toward the ball just to set him up for a backdoor into that tiny crease.
Damn. Hey, that's a dot right there.
Players like Jordan did their damage with the basketball, rising right up over defenders or countering with the dribble, crossing over to change directions into a pull-up. But Miller's counters were off-ball, so they weren't as celebrated or as easy to notice. He's down on the baseline here to use a screen, and when Jordan shoots the gap, Miller just counters by flaring it to the corner for a wide open three. So in the final minutes of that game, Jordan's waiting for Miller to set up near the baseline, so Reggie just instantly pops out behind the three-point line and drills a critical three. The timing of his cuts was also fantastic, spotted up in the corner on this very 1998 possession, then sneaking out of his defender's view so he could dart baseline and save the trip with a layup. This is all incredibly difficult to guard, yet it was looked down on back then because he was dependent on his teammates to pass him the ball, even though most of these are fairly basic passes.
Yeah, that was the narrative with Reggie Miller, even recently. You know, it was, man, Reggie Miller was getting carried by some great offenses, and he really wouldn't be anything without that offense of Mark Jackson, bro. Like, that was crazy. That was crazy.
But I actually think off-ball players let teammates do more because they don't require the basketball, so they can stress defenses while someone else goes to work. Indiana sets up a pick and roll with Miller on the weak side here, and as the defense rotates, he repositions himself as a high-value target behind the three-point line. His shooting helped the Pacers' spacing. John Starks is hugging him instead of sagging off and helping, and that makes plays like this easier. In transition, Dennis Scott literally face guards Miller, he's so afraid of him, and suddenly it's an easy drive for Mark Jackson. And this is similar to the gravity we've seen from Curry, where opponents will glue a defender to him for an entire possession.
Now that's crazy though. Yo, you're looking at you pause this shit. Yo, why are they playing 4-on-4? Nah, Curry is just right here. Can't even point. Curry's right here, and this man is dead ass guarding him right here. That's crazy, bro. And now your offense got all this space to work. You've essentially neutralized the defensive player of the year this year. Like, nah, Shooting's a cheat
willing
code.
to play 4-on-4.
Shooting's a cheat
or
code,
in
bro.
transition, they'll literally move out of the way of ball handlers to
yeah,
chase them
fuck
to the
Draymond.
three-point line.
Yeah.
Miller's gravitational force wasn't quite as severe as Curry's back then, in large part because of cramped spacing. A second defender jumps at him here, but there's an extra body in the lane, so Smits ends up popping for a jumper. But Reggie did create for teammates without the ball. They're down 3 in the final minute here, and this incredible cut after passing draws a defender away from the hoop and leaves Antonio Davis all alone. We've talked about Curry's screen gravity before, where defenders don't want to leave him because they're hyper-focused on his movement. And Miller's screens had a similar impact,
I've never heard of screen gravity,
occupying
though.
opponents
I will say that.
instead of showing or switching to
Chad,
help.
I will say that. I've never heard of screen gravity before. That's definitely a new one. That's definitely a new one right there.
And like Curry, defenders were weary of guarding him traditionally, so they didn't always look at the ball because they were so worried about losing Reggie on a cut. We've seen Curry's movement tug defenders off handoffs, where a teammate can keep it and spring free for a layup. And Miller had that same gravitational effect, where multiple defenders followed him. But again, the spacing prevents an easy layup.
Yeah.
Of course, Steph is known for pulling defenders.
I will say this, chat. If y'all are dead ass trying to study how plays break down, and I definitely should do this more. I honestly am just lazy with it. I think you learn more about basketball and schemes and how people play defense if when you're watching a play breakout, just pause, like literally just pause what the fuck is going on. You'll understand the coverages and why the coverages are the way that they are and how the play breaks down if you just pause the game. Because when you're watching shit live,
with him,
it's just, there's just so much shit going on. There's just so much shit going on while you're watching the game that at the end of the day, like sometimes you're just watching the game, you got chips in your hand, and it's just on some, hey, did the offense get a bucket or not? Nah, that's tough. Y'all could have done better. When in reality, you can learn so much more by just seeing things like slow down. You don't even need to watch it, whatchamacallit, pause and like just keep pausing. Just even watching that shit at like 0.5 speed might help a lot. But
on screens, creating open layups. And Miller was the original master of this, tugging defenders into his orbit to create...
That too. The dopest in the chat said, just don't watch the ball and you learn way more. Deadass. Like, instead of just ball watching as a viewer, literally look at everyone else. Literally look at everyone else and you will see, like, so much more.
Easy dunks. This never shows up in the stat sheet, but it's high leverage playmaking. And even in the congested spacing of the 90s, these gravitational assists were available every few games. And often in playoff situations when teams reacted to his scoring outbursts. With 3 minutes left in Game 7 of the 94 Conference Finals, he curls off a screen and sidesteps into a 3 to make it a 2-point game. With 2 minutes to play, Starks took away that left block screen, so Miller curls out the other side for a long 2 to make it a 1-point game. And finally, the third time they ran the action, Reggie drew a second defender, and that gravity created the go-ahead layup with 35 seconds left.
Big gravity.
So we know Miller could stress defenses with his movement and shooting, but was there more to his game? And was he just lucky to play on good teams, or was he actually the driving force that led Indiana to 5 conference finals in 7 years?
Predictions, chat, predictions. I'm gonna say, like I say, it's a cop-out answer, but it's the reality. It's a give and go. It's a pros and cons thing. You know, the truth is in the middle. You know what I'm saying? Especially in a team game, you can't just he can both be the driving force and benefit from a great team. So,
but to be able to run, shove, grab, fight, back in the day we run through the backstop.
Yep.
He did whatever it took to get open, and you knew he was shooting a jump shot. And the bad part about it was you didn't want to foul him.
Reggie sparked a long line of movement shooters, from Richard Hamilton
Yep.
to Ray Allen and Klay Thompson. But a sizable part of his game actually came off the dribble. Miller liked that classic triple threat position where he could face up and just shoot, or put it on the deck and work his way into a
That
pull-up
jump shot is
jumper
ugly,
over
though.
his defender.
Respectfully.
His height helped him here because at 6'7", he had a high enough release to shoot over bigger opponents. Reggie was
never
also
mind.
an early
It's not that.
adopter of the step
There's some
back,
angles where it just
yet
looks
another
crazy.
shot he hit while moving away from the basket.
Step
Miller
back.
also had a floater that always looked off balance but was somehow under control, and he could shoot this off one leg,
Never
or he
mind.
could
Doesn't
lean
look
in
that bad.
off
Doesn't
2
look that
feet
bad.
as
Doesn't look that
well.
bad.
This floater in particular highlights his tough shot making, where he could split a pick and roll, go off the wrong leg, and float it off the glass. And he had some serious range on this puppy, pulling up from like 19 feet and drifting it off the window.
Serious range on this
and
puppy.
this goes
Type
back
shit.
to that body control he has, getting into shots from so many different angles.
Hey.
Reggie could catch and flow into his shot in every direction. And I'm not sure there's ever been a better shooter twisting into shots on the move than Miller.
I think there's a lot of players in history that just did not play in the right era. And it's fine because they were needed to play in the era that they did so that the game could advance the way that it did. I think Reggie Miller is one of them. I think Chris Webber is one of them. I think Steve Nash is one of them. I think Dirk Nowitzki is one of them. Charles Barkley is one of them. These are players that, listen, bro, if they just played in a different era 20 years from now, they would be crazy. They would be crazy. And they were also crazy for their time because they was doing shit that people didn't know how to fucking deal with. You know what I'm saying? But just imagine Chris Webber right now, a 6'10" forward with a face-up game, can handle the ball, can pass the ball, can shoot the mid-range, can attack the basket. That sounds like Karl Anthony Towns with some dog in him. You know what I'm saying? That sounds crazy. I think Larry Bird is one of the people that get hold. Shout out to Blake Bass for the $5. Hope you're doing well, Beanie Souls. Appreciate it, man. We're doing good. We're doing well. Like, Larry Bird is one of them that gets hold by, like, just highlight reels and just the perception around him being a slow or, slow, tall, white dude that played in a weak era. But then you look at today, and I'm looking at, like, Luka. Slow, tall, white dude. Dominating the fuck out of this era. Dominating. You know? Same thing with Jokic. But
Ass is a bit wide on this one, and so he reverse pivots into a 23-footer, which is insane. And these are all technically assisted field goals, but really they're just difficult scoring moves from Miller on the move. When you look at his shot form, his shooting is even more mind-bending. A traditional technique uses the guide hand to stabilize the ball and the shooting hand to snap the wrist toward the hoop. But
all right, let me ask the real hoopers in the building. When y'all shoot, I wish I had a ball with me. When y'all shoot, right? Do I have any circular object? Essentially, do y'all leave space between the ball and your palm? Or do y'all palm the shit? Because I'm not going to lie, chat. When I was being taught how to shoot by my coach in rec ball in like 5th grade, they told me to leave space between this shit right here and the ball. And I think I also saw like a Michael Jordan video online, like him teaching how to shoot the ball, and he said, yeah, you got to leave space down here. But as of late, I've been watching like shot mechanics videos, like Curry, I think Dame, Reggie. A lot of these dudes be shooting with the palm rested on the ball, or the ball rested on their palm. And this is blowing my mind. I'm like, what the fuck? They said all the elite shooters, they leave space. But I don't know. That was just that was honestly one of those things that like, oh shit, this is what the fuck is going on? But that's what I'm saying. They're just saying whatever works for you. In actuality, apparently that's what it is. But I was dead ass thought it's on some whatever works for you, as long as you got space between the ball and the palm. But I got hold, man. Fuck that guy.
Miller uses the thumb on the guide hand to push it, then turns his wrist inwards so his hands clap together. And if you can shoot 92% from the free throw line like that, I think you deserve a private bedroom when you stay at a Wendy's. Maybe it's just me. Now, Reggie couldn't easily go to the mid or low post and generate a high percentage shot on demand, but he could clear out, put it on the floor, and score right over tight coverages at times. He just didn't do this a ton because, well, some of these are really hard shots, and he was probably more efficient creating space with his off-ball movement versus contested shots off the dribble. I think an even bigger reason he was less on ball in his offensive approach was his limited dribbling game. He couldn't always split the pick and roll cleanly like this, and sometimes it just looked like he had butterfingers where he'd lose the ball off his left hand when he felt a little bit of pressure.
When do we get to the cons, bro?
Take a play like this, where Reggie upfakes past his defender, and there's room to cross over and slither into this space, but he almost never dribbled in traffic.
Jaylen Brown
in
alert
this one,
is
he
crazy.
breaks out in transition and tries a toothless in and out dribble,
Jaylen Brown
throws
alert
off
is
his finishing
crazy,
a little. He actually wasn't a great finisher around the basket in traffic either, and some of that was just a lack of verticality on many of these shots. But he also wasn't very bendy and malleable with his body or the ball when he was up in the air. However, Reggie was quick, so he could use that first step for a straight line drive, and defenders had to worry about his shooting, which could briefly expose them to his penetration. Reggie really used that speed in transition, where he turned the game into a track meet and outran slower defenders.
Hey, Chad, who's a better player, man? Reggie Miller or Ray Allen? Reggie Miller or Ray Allen? I'm personally biased towards Ray Allen. Ray's my guy type shit.
He could do this off of makes. He's in the paint when this goes in, then runs a 30-yard dash in under 4 seconds for a layup. By the way, this is part of why his defensive rebounding numbers were so...
I think Reggie had more playoff success, even without the 2 rings of Ray and... 2 rings for Ray with Boston and Miami. I think overall, Reggie Miller had more success as a number 1 option. And I think he did rise in the playoffs more than Ray Allen. However, I think from a skill set perspective, Ray definitely got it. And then in terms of winning a championship, Ray got it. But
low, he was always looking to leak out in transition. And since he played with so many good rebounders, he was strategically deployed to take off and run opportunistically. He was also the first star in NBA history to run to the three-point line in transition. And while we often overlook transition offense, this was a dangerous little element in Miller's game. The other thing all that speed does is force teams to foul, and marching to the line was a massive part of Miller's scoring. Here he uses the threat of that transition 3 to blow by a defender for a friendly playoff foul, and he drew a ton of calls by just hurling himself deep into the paint. This is where that up fake into a quick first step puts so much pressure on defenses, and at just 185 pounds, contact bounced him around and was easy to see for officials. I would say he was even better at creating contact on his drives than actually finishing at the rim. He turns the corner here and makes sure to slightly jump into the defender, and that's all it takes to go flying. Miller was an early adopter of leaning into contact on jumpers to draw whistles. He had a primitive version of the rip-through move. He's actually trying to dribble here, but then accentuates the contact when he feels it because Indiana's in the bonus. And he was just a master of feeling a little hit.
This man is gargling on Reggie. Yo, bro, relax. He's literally showing why he's an offensive legend. Obviously, he's going to highlight his pros more than his cons. God damn.
And exaggerating it for the nearest referee. He had a reputation for flopping and embellishing plays, but in the games I watched, most of these were fouls that he just made sure everyone knew about. Despite his limited ball handling, Miller still generated free throws like an elite penetrator, taking over 8 attempts every 75 possessions in the playoffs at his peak. In the three-point era, the only guards to make free throws more frequently were James Harden, Dwayne Wade, Michael Jordan, and Russell Westbrook. Reggie's also known as the inventor of the leg kick, but Doug Collins used to try this in the 70s, and Miller didn't really do it
that's
until
a crazy
later in his
leg kick,
career.
bro.
This little leg flare was one of 2 kicks I
Did y'all
saw
see
in
Doug
all
Collins?
the games I
That's
rewatched.
crazy.
Even with his exaggerations, his game just organically generated free throws. When he feels pressure, he picks up the dribble, then goes to the floater when he feels contact. And continuation was much stricter back then. This is a foul on the floor because Kobe did not pick it up before contact. But remember, Miller naturally ended his dribble early and went to the floater. So he ended up with a ton of free throws on jump shots like this. He also used the threat of his shot to set up defenders, throwing an up and under here to just drop it on someone's head. And after this legendary cut where he ran around a screen in a circle, Reggie up-faked Horace Grant into purgatory for more free throws. And
I shot the Blake Bass for the $5 elite penetrator. Hey, yo. That was crazy. Hey, I get it, man.
And watch him grab his own man to create a moving screen that forces Orlando into that switch. Miller had a deep bag of, let's say, not so legal tricks, holding and grabbing to break free, and watch him pull Danny Manning out of the paint on this play to open up a teammate. Here's Reggie explaining his perfectly by-the-book techniques.
So first you want to kind of grab a little bit. And you want to act like you're getting held when really you're doing the holding. So you're like, ref. So,
this was all incredibly irritating for opponents, hooking.
I think it's the small shit like this, too, why, in my opinion, y'all got to ease out on the refs. Deadass. Because I'm telling you right now, if the referees had legitimate 20/20 vision and called everything by the book, games would last 3 times longer. There would be 5 times the amount of whistles compared to what we see right now. I think that human error aspect of refereeing is what makes the game the way that it is as well. You know what I'm saying? These things that you can get away with, knowing how referees make calls, how you can use that into your advantage. All that different shit, bro. Like it plays a part as to why the game the way it is. The way that it is. And if we took that all away and relied on sensors and play, by the book shit, I'm telling you right now, things will get abused even more than they already are. And it would not be fun. It would not.
A defender and then accentuating contact for more free throws. And Ty Corbin looks like he's going through the stages of grief. And he wasn't the only one left with emotional vertigo after going through Miller's mind games. Some opponents took out that frustration physically, and he pushed a ton of players past their breaking point, including John Starks in the 1993 playoffs.
So pussy.
And I was so mad. I mean, oh man, I'd want to just take my fist and just put it right through his face.
John Starks in the 1998 playoffs.
Damn.
Kobe Bryant wanted to try some shadow boxing with him one time after a game.
Hey!
And some guy in Chicago snapped and tried to gouge his eyes out, and naturally Reggie was the only player ejected.
Chad, I ain't gonna lie. I haven't seen that clip in a minute. That is a crazy, Chad, that's a crazy way of attacking someone. Not fists. Just give me your eyes. Like, yo, that's crazy. That's some insane behavior right there, bro. What the fuck? Going for not even like punching the eye, not even just grabbing it, bruh. No. Nah, MJ is crazy.
The thing is, Miller thrived off this heightened energy.
Not y'all calling
and
MJ
he
a
would
crack
take
addict.
the physicality
Relax.
and hit
Relax.
right back. This is from the decisive Game 5 against Atlanta in 1996, where Miller played just 3 weeks after fracturing his eye socket in a collision. He constantly checked in and out of the game, sometimes playing only single possessions to carry an otherwise
thoughts are funny,
faltering
though.
offense while sucking oxygen on the sideline during breaks. Reggie poured in 29 points in 31 minutes, including 16 of Indiana's final 20 to spark a fourth quarter comeback. And in the final minutes, with the Pacers trailing by 2, he launched this 30-foot pull-up to finally put them in the lead.
Damn.
With 10 seconds to play and down by a bucket, they went back to Miller. The Hawks doubled him, and his game winner fell just short.
Woo!
So this game has been lost to history. But it encapsulates how difficult he could be to slow down and how he could raise his game when the time called for it, which might explain why Indiana was so difficult to eliminate in the playoffs.
If I had to pick a team that gave us the toughest time in the East, Indiana was probably the toughest outside of Detroit.
When contenders from the 1990s are brought up, Miller's Pacers are rarely mentioned, with Clyde Drexler's Blazers, Charles Barkley's Suns, the Sonics, Jazz, or even the Knicks. But Indiana was arguably better than most of these teams in the playoffs. If we look at postseason point differentials and adjust for opponent quality, the mid-90s Pacers have a better three-year run than any of those teams outside of Utah.
Big graphs.
They were nearly as good again at the end of the decade under Coach Larry Bird, and all of these teams look like excellent offenses in the playoffs despite a lack of star power. The early 90s Pacers were already really good offensively, but they never made it out of the first round due to their lackluster defense. So on the eve of the 1994 season, new coach Larry Brown traded their second best offensive player, three-time All-Star Detlef Schrempf, for a versatile defender named Derek McKee. The 7'4" Rick Smits emerged as a second scoring weapon next to Miller, giving them a high-end post-up option to balance Miller's movement-heavy actions. With Antonio and Dale Davis, Indiana added more rebounding and defense around Miller and Smits, and suddenly they were difficult to eliminate for just about anyone. To offset Schrempf's offensive loss, Brown ran more screening actions for Miller, while teammates waited for him to scramble the defense. And McKee was such a great fit because he had some serious passing chops himself. This gave Indiana a little more playmaking, especially outside the paint. And critically, when Miller or Smits were doubled, it gave them a fantastic extra passer. I love their synergy. Smits is doubled in the post. Quickly
I'm really
hits
locked
McKee,
in, Chad. I ain't gonna
who
lie.
could use Miller's shooting threat to fake out this defender, and then Smits ends up cleaning up on the rebound.
Hey,
so those Pacers could flow from Miller's screening actions right into a single coverage post-up for Smits, or they could run Reggie around a series of picks, and McKee
it looks like
could
they
take
didn't have
advantage of
the
Miller's
star power of the
gravity.
Knicks.
This
but they were
passing was so
much,
helpful
better
because
well
neither
coached.
Smits nor Miller were strong distributors.
This is
Reggie's
nasty
open
spacing.
there, and they'd mostly hit basic passes
Chat,
instead
this
of
is what I'm
more
talking about. Look at this. Look at this spacing, bro. This dude, I'm pretty sure this is a guard. He's so bad at shooting that his man is all the way down here. This dude is forced to be down here because, again, he's a big man that can't shoot. So even if Reggie Miller gets past these two defenders, there's going to be two dudes waiting right there to fucking just smack his fucking ass. And then even if he passes out, he's not going to make that shit. So he's going to need to step in. Like, this is gross. This is
and skip
insane.
passes. So McKee could be the one to move it
Look at this, bro.
along to the open
God damn.
man in those situations. Miller's ball handling probably hurt his on-ball playmaking.
Like, look at this, bro. They could just double. They could just double team all day because even when this guy gets the ball, he's not doing shit with it.
He also just misses Smits on the cut here for a
At the
less
three, though.
potent
At the
kick
three.
out. This is where Curry was able to extend the blueprint beyond off-ball movement. Steph added elite ball handling that turned him into an unheard of pull-up threat. And that ball handling security freed up mental space for really good passing too. Compare that to Reggie, who uses more processing power to set up this crossover, so he completely misses Smits running free to the rim and ends up doing it himself anyway. Miller was always a very willing passer who understood the right play, but he was more of a reactionary passer rather than someone who anticipated openings. In transition here, he doesn't realize a teammate is going to outrun everyone down the court, so he never pulls the trigger on it, and he's much more comfortable with a pass like that when he can actually see it open up like this. Here's a trickier version in the half court where Antonio Davis is briefly open, and this requires anticipating the double or that cut into open space, and nothing happens, so they just reset. I do think Miller's passing improved a little as the decade progressed. He's bothered by some pressure here around a screen and just completely misses an open shooter. But 6 years later in pick and roll, he's able to read the slip and throw it over the top nicely. I think he was a little more under control on drives in those later years, and by 93 or 94, he always looked for an early pocket pass in pick and roll situations, which could free up a shooter or get...
This is the weird thing to me about comparing players, is because, number one, different positions. Number two, different rules. Number three, different situations. There's so many different factors. But even within that, how do you compare Steph Curry to Reggie Miller? Which Steph Curry are we talking about? Which Reggie Miller are we talking about? Because I think, like, let's take Jordan, for example, right? Jordan's peak statistical years was the first half of his career. The way he played, though, was completely different from how he played in 96, 97, 98. Jordan was way more athletic earlier in his career. He used to finish at the basket at a way higher rate, both from an efficiency standpoint and just an attempt standpoint. He wasn't as good of a shooter as he was compared to the later parts of his career. He wasn't a better post player compared to the later parts of his career. So when we're comparing these players, like, how the fuck who are we comparing it to? And then we talk about accolades, 6 MVPs to 5 MVPs, 4 rings to 3, and there's just so much context being missed. And then we get into the subjectivity of what everyone's criteria is. Everyone has a different criteria. This, that, and the third. Even if you go by 4-year peak, who is to say what someone's 4-year peak is? You know what I'm saying? I think statistically speaking for Kobe Bryant, that might have been from 01 to 04. Not 01 to 04. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. Is it really, like, what is Kobe Bryant's 4-year peak? 01 to 05 or 05 to 08? Is it 05 to 09? Is it 06 to 2010? Like, there's so much. Like, at some point, I ain't gonna lie, we just need to shut the fuck up and just watch basketball. I mean, at some point, dead ass, you just gotta shut the fuck up and watch basketball and leave it at that. Maybe KD was right. Can you hoop or not? The more I really think about what KD said, bro, I'm like, can you hoop or not?
The roll man headed downhill. Even with his passing limitations, he could still create offense for teammates with all that attention he drew. Teams were worried about his shooting, so sometimes just a basic kick out generated wide open offense. This blended into his off-ball game, where he'd fly off a screen and draw extra defenders, and simple passes set up easy shots. On this curl action, he learned to hit the screener over the years, although he was inconsistent with this pass, sometimes misreading the play like this. But when he started taking over games down the stretch, teams would send multiple defenders at him to force someone else to beat them. With the Pacers down 3 in the final game against the Bucks, Milwaukee sends half the city out to defend him, leading to this wide open 3 to tie the game. And in the waning seconds of this playoff game in Orlando, the Magic play a game of anybody but Reggie, which frees up Byron Scott for the win. Miller is known for his endless clutch theatrics, both at the buzzer and down the stretch of key games, where his stone-cold shooting so often put Indiana in front. And for whatever reason, he ramped up his aggression in the playoffs. There are moments when I'm watching him and wondering why he doesn't look to score, and then I realize I'm watching a regular season game. Because in the postseason, he was constantly hunting weaknesses and pushing the issue, which spiked his playoff scoring compared to his regular season numbers. When we adjust for opponent quality, Miller looks like one of the very best scorers in all of NBA history. Only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and maybe Dirk Nowitzki can match his volume and efficiency over a sustained stretch. And what's even more mind-blowing is that Miller has another 5-year run later in his career that's close to Curry's peak playoff scoring and still looks better than someone like Charles Barkley at his peak. Back then, no one noticed how prolific he was as a scorer because most published stats were about the regular season, where Miller scored an incredible 5 fewer points per game during these peak years. We don't have plus-minus data in the playoffs for those mid-90s seasons, but we do have it for the regular season back to 1994. And Miller looks like a big impact player on good teams, but short of the very best. Fittingly, that outlier in the upper right is Steph Curry, who took the Miller archetype to new heights. The playoff plus-minus we do have for Reggie at the end of his career looks similar in impact, but I wonder if it's more impressive at his peak given those incredible scoring numbers. In 94-95, the Pacers were just 2-9 when his true shooting was under 55%, but when it was over 55%, they went an incredible 18-4. Either way, his playoff scoring and off-ball movement were the centerpiece of some of the most successful offenses of the decade. And even though he wasn't fully appreciated back then, Reggie Miller paved the road for future generations and was an offensive legend who was truly ahead of his time. If you want more
I think ultimately Reggie was ahead of his time. I think as basketball discourse has advanced, we have been able, and this is the beauty about the new advanced analytics era, I think we've been able to both qualify and quantify why players back then were as effective and revered as they were. It's not always about, let's use advanced analytics to expose how overrated this dude is. We can also use it in the reverse in terms of, okay, we can use these advanced analytics to really put into perspective as to why this player is so revered, even though the numbers are the way that they are. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like some players, they get holed. They really do get holed by surface level analytics. They really do. I think another example is like Allen Iverson. You know what I'm saying? Like, there has to be a reason as to why this dude was viewed as a top 5 player in the early 2000s. There had to be a reason as to why, he won that MVP in 2001. There had to be a reason as to why when we talk about the hardest single coverage players of all time, like Allen Iverson is always in those conversations. But then when you look at his statistics, it's like, this dude is always shooting like 39, 41%. Like that's not a good percentage. But in actuality, if you look at his situation, the help he had around him, and you take into consideration other advanced analytics that help your argument, it's like, okay, that's why he was revered the way that he is. And I also think, again, we just saw a lot of nerdy shit on our screen. I think there is a balance of like, okay, let's not rely too much on the analytics. But this is why I also say I'd rather be on the side of the analytics dudes than the ball don't stop dudes. Because at least with the analytics side, they are backing up their claims, their takes, and their statements with data. And literally in any other field, if someone has a take, even if we're talking about social issues, when someone has a take, the first thing you would ask from them is to analytically back it up. You say, I don't know, let's say black people are disproportionately getting, lower wages than other race groups. How do you back, what's your evidence? Data. I got data. But for somehow, some way, basketball is one of these fields where it's like, oh, you're using data? You fucking nerd. Data? What the fuck? Use your eyeballs. Like, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's so crazy. That's so crazy to me. But regardless, shout out to Reggie Miller. I do think people are turning the corner in terms of the Reggie Miller respect. And I fuck with it. You know what I'm saying? I never had beef with Reggie Miller growing up. So I'm not really praying for his downfall. Shout out to Thinking Basketball for the video. That was a fantastic video on his part. Always a pleasure to watch Thinking Basketball videos. And, go ahead and check out his channel. You know what I'm saying? One of the best basketball minds out there.